No problem. So for today, I let David and Sochi know that we were gonna, because we had a small group, start off with just Q&A, any questions and answers, and then if nothing comes up or if you have no questions because you know it all, then we can go ahead and I can give a little bit of touch a little bit upon the topic of the 5 hindrances that are discussed by Buddhism. So feel free to unmute yourselves and ask any questions.
Hi. Sorry. So I guess it's not necessarily a question, but maybe like a roadblock. You know, like in stressful situations, I've started to slowly like just focus on breathing. It seems to be working, but there's instances where the stress gets to that like a really big point, and it feels like, you know, it doesn't do much.
And actually, my question would be related very well with her question. How are you feeling from your perspective as a psychologist and Buddhist with intense emotions, avoiding to react on impulse versus stepping back and responding when people are getting angry or just emotional intensity?
Good. Very good question that actually related to the hindrances. So the first thing that came to mind is I often, in my mind and in my practice, use the analogy of exercise. If I start lifting weights, I'm not going to start benching my body weight right away. You know, I need to work up to my body weight to bench. Or if I start running, I'm not going to be running a marathon after not having run for almost a year. It's require me to run maybe, you know, try to get that first mile in. Or if I can't get that first mile, walk a little bit until I can get there.
Right.
Same thing with meditation in that you are building up a skill. You are building up a muscle. You're building up an endurance. And so it takes practice. And that's why we call it the practice of meditation. Your expectation that you should not be overwhelmed by your stress, or that you should not be overwhelmed by feelings, or you should not be overwhelmed by the strong feelings of others. That expectation can become a block. It can become an obstacle. Right. And it can become a source of shame for you because you feel like I should have been able to do that. I didn't. I failed. I'm a bad Buddhist. Mm-hmm. And that does not help. That does not help your practice at all. So you have to be humble. Remind yourself that you are still human. You're not the Buddha. You're not enlightened. And it requires you to practice and get to that level. And there'll be days you're doing phenomenal and everything's falling apart around you and you're doing great. And there'll be other days where just one simple thing will set you off. You know, and that's the same thing with a marathon. You know, I've only run one marathon, but there were good days in my running and there were bad days in my running. And when I used to work out with weights, I had good workout days and I had bad workout days. So be kind to yourself. You're not going to get it right all the time. You're not going to have the super strength to do it all. You're going to work up to it little by little. As I had mentioned earlier, though, those failures, quote unquote failures, that's the mud, that's the dirt that helps the lotus flower blossom. Bogdan, before you arrived, I was talking about the lotus flower being a strong symbol in Buddhism and how the lotus flower requires mud, dirt, and everything that's icky in order to grow and become the beautiful flower that it is.
Right.
So you need those failures, quote unquote failures, to be the mud and the dirt to your lotus seed so that you can go back and reflect. All right, what was my trigger point? What happened? What was I thinking beforehand? What was I feeling? Was I tired? Was I caught off guard? Was I already stressed from things previously? Have I not been keeping up with my meditation practice? What are some of the things that are at the root of your intense emotions? Try again. And then you'll fail again. And that's more dirt for your seed, more nourishment for that lotus seed. Reflect on it again and work at it little by little. That's the workout. That's the practice of meditation, the practice of mindfulness. When you have the expectation, however, that I should be happy now,
Yeah.
that can set you up for some disappointment and more suffering.
Right.
Can be happy now. So that's the other thing about Buddhism. It tells us that we can be happy now. But when you add that should, I should be happy now, something just happens that creates an obstacle.
Right.
It's a wonderful little paradox. And when I remind myself that, and I'm able to just be present and just take a deep breath, it's amazing how quickly emotions can come down. My wife noticed the difference when I was furious, caught myself, took a deep breath, and in the next breath, I was apologizing. There was no, there was a acknowledgement that I was not reacting right. Anger is not helping this conversation. I apologized, which shocked her because I wasn't one to apologize much before. But recognizing the importance of that, I did it, and we were able to continue our conversation.
Instead of arguing.
Instead of arguing. So one of the things about anger is that at the root of so much anger, of our anger, is some form of suffering, of hurt, whether it be betrayal or an expectation that is not met. It shouldn't be this way. There is some underlying belief that was proven wrong, and the reaction then is anger or sadness or anxiety, some intense emotion. When we can reflect on that and find the sources of our strong emotions, then it becomes easier. Just acknowledging that that's where the source is, you'll see a drop in the intensity of the emotions. That then gives you more motivation to continue exploring what is underlying these strong emotions, so that you can work on those things and slowly, little by little, chip away. The other thing to be remember that when we're angry, and usually anger is a sign of some sort of hurt. And so anger serves the purpose of warning other people, hey, I'm hurt, get away from me. That's the primitive reason for anger. If you think of animals, when they're angry and they're expressing anger, they're warning you, hey, I'm being pushed to my limits. I'm about to attack you if you don't back off. That's the underlying purpose of anger, to warn those around you, you're being pushed to your limit. But the unfortunate consequence of expressing anger intensely, or yelling, or raising your voice, because we have this primitive knowledge that anger means you're about to get attacked, the instinct of the other person is to put up their defenses. So even if we're not attacking physically, right now in our society, although physical attacks still happen, we also have a lot of emotional attacks, which can hurt as much and actually can register in the pain centers of our brain. So you can become emotionally hurt and it will register as pain. So because we see someone who's angry, we know that an attack is imminent, is about to happen, whoop, our walls come up, our defenses come up. If I'm the person who's angry and I'm yelling, there's no way I'm going to really get to the other person, because their defenses are up and the conversation is just productive. And if someone is yelling at me, let's say someone else is angry and they're yelling at me, then yeah, my walls or my defenses will come up. I defend myself, make excuses, or go on the attack myself. So intense emotions and anger, they're not evil, they're not bad. It's just we have to be mindful of what we do with them. The example I gave of the argument with my wife, in that breath, I was able to say, honey, let me have a few seconds to calm down. In that second breath, I was able to sort of, because I had been working up to it, I was able to identify what was the source of my hurt, source of my anger. Yeah. Honey, I'm sorry. All right. I'm angry because of this and this and this. And we were able to have the conversation. Now that second breath, I couldn't get there just like that. It doesn't just happen.
Right.
The way you get there is, all right, I got really angry earlier today. Why? Take that with you to meditation, explore, be curious, be non-judgmental, okay? It's too late now, you got angry and you already reacted. And so just be non-judgmental about your exploration of your anger, your anxiety, your sadness, whatever the intense emotion. And as you start noticing the patterns, what happens next is you start noticing the patterns as they are happening, but you can't help yourself, all right? And it's a funny and sad moment when you see yourself falling into the same pattern and you know it's happening and you just can't stop yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But the good thing is that that's progress, because before you could only do that after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
You could only reflect on your anger after it had already exploded on everyone else. So now I'm working back. Now I'm able to see it happening as it's happening, which means that if I continue practicing that, eventually I'll get to the point where I will catch it before it happens. You work your way back. Anything that stresses you out is the same thing. So think of your reaction to stress and think about what was the underlying things that occurred beforehand, right before it happened, before you had your outburst. And study it, study yourself, be curious about yourself. Find yourself to be a magnificent creation. Wonderful. You are a product of billions of years of evolution. And you are one of the few creatures in the universe, as far as we know, that is capable of doing this self-reflection. How wonderful, how magnificent we are. So take advantage of that beauty and reflect on yourself, and find those patterns little by little.
Mm-hmm.
Now, sometimes involved in our intense emotions are delusions. And delusions, the nefarious thing about delusion is that they have a way of taking over our mind and we're not able to see them for ourselves. Or it's difficult to see our delusions, our own delusions. But find that person who's always picking out what's wrong in other people, and they'll be very quick to find out what your delusions are and can point them out to you. Find someone that you can trust, a trusted friend, a family member, a psychologist or a counselor, someone who can be that outside third person who can see what are the delusional thinking, point them out to you in a caring, compassionate way.
That's very interesting point. Can you expand a little bit, like delusion in sense of unrealistic beliefs, expectations?
Yes, and I'm trying to stick with Buddhist terminology because there's a whole another way of thinking about this from a psychological perspective.
Right.
Buddhist perspective, Bogdana, you hit it on the nail. Really, one of the underlying themes that you see through a lot of the Buddhist writings is this idea that we are not being realistic.
Right. Okay. Yes.
That we have all these expectations of what the world should be like. When it doesn't meet those expectations, we suffer. We have these ideas of how things should come out, how people should behave. We have these ideas of what is just, what is fair. And we have this belief, and this is the delusion, that it has to be that way. And if it's not that way, I am unhappy. So that's the disconnect between our belief and then reality. So mindfulness then, and meditation, concentration meditation and mindfulness meditation, they develop that part of your brain that is needed to more clearly see reality as reality. To be more mindful of those delusions as they pop up. For me, it started with any time I had an intense emotion, that was my red flag. Something was going wrong here. And it wasn't just anger and it wasn't just sadness. In happiness was also something that I would watch out for, because sometimes I was being happy about the wrong things.
Right.
And so there was, anytime there was intense emotion, there was something there for me to learn, because there was most likely, almost always, some form of delusion involved. I'll give you a good example. At the birth of my children, intense happiness at seeing my children. When I reflected back and looked at more mindfully at what was going on in my mind and in my heart, all these dreams and delusions about what my children were going to be before my children hadn't even reached the day of age.
Right.
And so those beliefs, those delusions were contributing to an intense happiness that, if I'm not careful about, will lead then the next day to intense disillusionment. And so being mindful of that then can balance things out a bit more.
Right. That's very helpful.
I have I have a question. Probably it's a quick one. I've never. It's the first time I heard about the bells. Is this something that is sort of needed for meditation, or is it just a sort of?
Yeah, the bells are ritualistic, and rituals then are meant to. One purpose of the rituals is to help get your mindset just right for meditation. And so what happens is that because people they attend certain temples, they get used to the fact that the bell means up. Time for attention, something is happening, time to calm the mind and be present. The bell is not necessary. It is helpful, but is not necessary. You can develop and this is something I talked about last week. So the last week's Dharma talk is on Facebook. So if you find us on Facebook, you can see the recording of last week's talk on how to develop a meditation habit. And in there, I talked about rituals and how you might want to develop your own rituals. So there's the sign of the cross that the Catholics use.
Right.
And Episcopalians, that's a ritual. And when they do this, it gets them into the right frame of mind. And so it doesn't have to be an external bell. It can just be a simple bow. You know, you bow to yourself, you bow to the world, you bow to nature, you bow to whatever. And that becomes your ritual, something you do right before you start your meditation.
Okay, great.
Any other questions, thoughts, comments, insights that you had while I droned on?
Oh, very interesting. Thank you for sharing. It's very helpful learning experience. Insight building.
So it's interesting because anger is one of the hindrances. So I'll just briefly mention what the hindrances are. The hindrances, Buddhism identified 5 things that keep you from advancing spiritually.
Okay.
These are particularly bad when they happen during meditation. 5 hindrances are sensual desire, anger, doubt, sloth or torpor or laziness, and then restlessness or anxiety. And real briefly, so sensual desires isn't just sexual desires, it's just any desire to satisfy desires from the senses. So wanting to see something, wanting to smell something, taste something, feel something. And in Buddhism, the thoughts are considered a type of sense. Your thoughts of desire are also considered a sense or a sensual activity. And the way to, and actually let me talk about anger and doubt, because the way to deal with those 3 are very similar. Anger is very much what we talked about already, those sort of a very intense emotion. So I'm not going to talk more about that. Doubt, doubt is sort of that feeling of, well, this isn't working for me. Is this really the right thing to do?
Right.
Or all 3, for those 3, it really boils down to just being very mindful of what is it you truly need. And so when you have the sensual desires, when you have doubt, when you have anger, if you keep exploring and keep exploring further and further down, Quan Tri from Temple says use the why method. Keep asking why. Why this, and keep asking why. Eventually you'll get to the idea that you want to be happy. It's very simple. You just want to be happy. You want to suffer less. In fact, you don't want to suffer at all. And so when you're seeking out that desire, when you're angry and trying to fix what's wrong, or when you're feeling doubt about whether you're doing the right thing, you're doubting whether you're on the path to happiness. And so what you do is just be mindful and just remind yourself that the things you have been trying haven't been working. Give the meditation and the spiritual path enough time investment to see if that is what is it that you really need, if you see improvements in your life. The other good thing about doubt is that it can shake things up. And so if you don't see improvements in your happiness, or you don't see that you're suffering less, then that could be a sign that there's something else missing. Okay? And so then you seek it out. You try different practices, find a different teacher, find a different religion, find whatever that will start making you feel true. The last 2 hindrances, anxiety and restlessness. With anxiety and restlessness, 2 things to keep in mind. One, it's amazing how often we make our anxieties the enemy. So learn to stop making it the enemy and just accepting that it is part of being human. Then you stop wasting time trying to fight against something you can't fight against. Instead, what you want to do is just be more present oriented. And a really good way, I remember a vet was starting to have a panic attack. And a really good technique that this vet used that helped her out was she started doing a meditation that helps you be more present. And it's not a meditation of breathing. In it, what you do is, what are 5 things I see? What are 4 things I hear? 3 things I smell. 3 things that I can touch. 2 things that I can smell, and 1 thing that I can taste. And so by being more present oriented with the senses, it makes the person more focused in the here and now.
Right.
Which is contradictory to anxiety, which makes you focus on the future. And sometimes you don't even know what you're worrying about, you're just worrying. And so that's anxiety, that's how anxiety works. And then finally, the sloth and torpor, the laziness or something, is just sort of, sometimes that manifests itself in, am I doing the right thing? Am I just staying in my job just because I'm afraid of trying something new? Am I staying in the relationship because I'm afraid of what would happen if I were alone. Am I staying in this path in my career or whatever? If ever you have those doubts as to whether you are stuck or in a rut, the question to ask yourself is, how is my X, my job, my relationship, whatever, benefiting myself, benefiting others? And what are things about this thing that I can be grateful for? And when those things don't amount to much, then that's usually a sign that then it's time to make some sort of change. It doesn't necessarily mean leaving the relationship or leaving the job. It just means something needs to change.
Right.
Either change within or just leaving it behind altogether and trying something new. There was one of, oh, this one is very interesting, and this is dealing with sensual desire. So I should have mentioned it earlier. We are seeing in the research, psychologists are seeing in the research more and more and more, this idea called miswanting. We want these things because we think they're going to make us happy, but when we achieve them, there are various mechanisms in the brain that make them meh, or just don't cause us to be happy. An example is money. Once you've reached a certain level of comfort and safety, so once you have shelter, once you're able to function in society because you have a way of getting around, whether it be a metro, a bus, or a car, or a bicycle, once you have certain basic needs met, having more money does not make you much more happier. So billionaires and millionaires around the world are not much happier than those of us who are not millionaires and billionaires. And it's because we miswant. We think that having more money, winning the lottery is going to make us happy. But time and time again, the research just doesn't support that.
Right.
We miswant a certain career. We miswant a certain degree or educational attainment. And time again, those things are not what makes us happy. We're running out of time here, so what I'll do is maybe, so next week we're not meeting. I'm gonna see if I can put together the research on happiness. What are the things that make us happy? What are the things, the habits that we can develop that do produce happiness, and that research supports produces happiness? And it's interesting that the things that research is supporting are things that Buddhism has been talking about for 2,500 years.
Right.
But the good thing about looking at modern research is that it puts it in words and in a mindset that's more familiar to us. So it's easier for us to understand and gain some insight into some of these ancient Buddhist teachings. So I'll aim to do that for the next talk in 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks. Thank you so much.
Any other questions before we head off here?
Not right now. There are many questions, but not enough.
Right?
Actually, yeah.
All right.
Thank you so much for taking the time to teach us. Nice meeting you all, and I will see you in 2 weeks then.
All right. See y'all in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I will stay, as usual, I will stick around if anyone has any more questions they just want to ask one-on-one. Otherwise, I'll see y'all in 2 weeks. I'll post the information on Meetup and the Facebook.
Okay. Thank you, Alex. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.